the Supreme Court has come out with a decision, and this is from Kyle Cheney from the Politico. It says, breaking Supreme Court upholds state ability to enforce electors' pledges to the candidate who wins the statewide popular vote. In other words, faithless electors are likely a thing of the past. And he has a little quote here. It says, held, a state may enforce an elector's pledge to support his party's nominee and the state voters' choice for president. Again, this is really breaking news. It's just like literally just happened. And I know you haven't had a chance to really digest the decision, nor have I. But I'm curious what your opinion is on faithless electors, Pete. Pete, I think you have your mic muted. Pete, your mic is still muted. I can see it on the. It appears that we have lost Pete for a second here. I think we're just having some technical problems. When we were off the air, we were mentioning that we were seeming to have some technical problems here. Pete, are you back with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. At first, it looked like your mic was just muted.
Right. So I would say that on one hand, the Constitution doesn't say anything that would prevent this from states from passing these sorts of laws. On the other hand, it doesn't say anything that would allow them to pass such laws. So it doesn't prohibit, it doesn't allow, and it's kind of a black box. What is the Electoral College? We kind of say it's obvious now because we've done it so many times. We've had 45 presidents, and we've had elections now for almost 250 years. But I don't think it actually is quite that obvious. I think the Supreme Court decision is fine, again, because it's simply a black box. And, what was the original? If we're taking it from a textual perspective, I don't know that you could rule that there's any strong basis to prohibit the states from doing this. And, this is largely left up to the states to decide how they choose their electors and so on. So that seems fair. That seems on the level. And if you want to talk about original intent, originally, a lot of these electors were chosen by state legislatures, or they might be chosen by the governor and his cabinet, something like that, depending on which state you're talking about. And so when we talk about original intent of the Electoral College, it's obviously very flexible. The fact that we've gone from legislatures choose electors, and it's usually a split decision within a state, to now it's the voters choose the electors, and it's winner take all, except in Nebraska and Maine. That's a pretty wide shift, and I think it shows you that the Constitution gives states a lot of latitude. Now, what I think would be a really interesting case is there has been talk about making the Electoral College. Well, a lot of states want to apportion their delegates instead of based on the state election, and this decision specifically talks about the state election. So, if the voters in your state vote for, say, Donald Trump, then your electors are bound for Donald Trump. But what happens if you decide you want to bind the electors to the national popular vote, which is an idea that's out there, and a lot of state legislatures have passed laws to do exactly that, and it kicks in when a majority of states, or when a majority of the Electoral College has ratified laws or constitutional amendments to that effect. Now that's really interesting, and so this decision does not approach that. I would say honestly, this decision isn't going to have a huge effect because we've never had an election swung by faithless electors ever. We've had faithless electors. Ron Paul won, I think, 1 or 2 electoral votes in Texas, because it's a big state and, it's the state party chooses the electors. In Washington, some of Hillary's electors defected in 2016, some for Colin Powell, some for people who weren't on the ballot. I think her name was like Linda Eaglefeather or something. So that can happen. That absolutely can happen. You can have faithless electors, but it has never mattered. Where it will matter is if this applies to NPV, National Popular Vote, and if the states pass it, and I think they will eventually, because there's a lot of there's a big groundswell out there for NPV. A lot of voters don't like the idea of the electoral college; it doesn't seem fair to them. One man, one vote. I don't agree with that. I think the founding fathers set this up this way for a reason. But I think that's where we might be going. And so this case may be a little bit of a preview that the states have a lot of latitude to do things that maybe aren't so wise with how they make decisions, simply because the Supreme Court doesn't have the authority to second guess them, not because it's good or bad.
Yeah, I do want to just mention that there is another interpretation as far as intent of the framers that specifically deals with the idea that they actually wanted the possibility of faithless electors, simply because they didn't trust the individual citizens necessarily with the election of the president. That's one of the intentions of the electoral college. It's one of the more, I guess, controversial aspects of the electoral college, is that the framers of the Constitution simply were not in any way comfortable with the popular vote of the president, period. And so I just wanted to kind of mention that there is that interpretation, which would actually advocate for the idea of faithless electors more so, I think, than it actually argues, the other way around.
Sure.
But like I said, this is an evolving story. This just came out. This literally is like breaking news. So there's going to be probably a lot more information coming out, a lot more commentary coming out about this, probably just in the coming hours.
Yeah, I would argue what you just said. I've heard that as well, and I know that's usually people on the left who say that. I would say that is definitely a myth, that it's about not having faith in the people, or it wasn't about the people. It wasn't like the founding fathers thought that the people were stupid or anything. It was a matter of the federal government is a creation of the states, and so the head of the federal government is accountable to the states. So the states get to choose who the electors are. That's the general idea. It wasn't making it sort of the people versus the elites. I think is the framing that people on the left who don't like the idea of Republican institutions want to use, but I don't know that it really has a strong basis in historical fact.